Okay, everyone. Now, before we get on to seeing the driver go to the passenger and so on, there's a couple of bugs we need to fix before we move on. The first one is that, well, if you change your destination or change your position after you try to get a destination, it's not going to get the current position, because this get current position is only getting the position we get at the first time when we start up the app. But if we decide to change our position after we have started the app, it's not going to get the correct route. Let me show you how this is. Maybe you noticed it yourself if you've been tinkering with the app so far. So let's say we change our position. Then when we try to get our destination again, it's not going to use our real current position we have. It's going to use the one we started out when we first opened the app. So it's down here where we had our initial position at the Googleplex. Then I changed my position to be up here after I had the app opened, and you can see it starting from here instead. And the reason why is because we're using the function get current position instead of watch position. So get current position is just going to get the first position when we mount the app, while watch position is going to run continuously in the background as there is a new position every time. So it's going to update our latitude and longitude in the state every time the position is changing. So, but one thing to keep in mind is that as we unmount the app, we need to unmount the watch as well. So let's say const watch ID. It's going to return a watch ID, this function. And then when we unmount, so we say component will unmount, we're going to say navigator geolocation clear watch with the watch ID. So I'm simply going to say this watch ID. And then we say this .watch ID as well. So now it should be updating the position inside the latitude and longitude continuously. Now there's one more thing. Sometimes maybe the position is not being gotten before we render the map. So we might just have a really blue map you start out with because you're at the 0,0 coordinate, which we set in here. Now in order to just test that we got this latitude and longitude, we can say that, well, we can start out by having a latitude of null and a longitude of null. And then we check in the render function if it has a latitude and longitude. So if this state latitude is not null, if it's null, we can say just return null. So you could also return an activity indicator, something similar like that. But for now, let's just return null. It's only going to be an instant while we're testing it right now. But that's keeping the app from crashing or showing a blue map. So let's try and reload it again. See if it works this time. So we start up over here. Now let's go back to the Googleplex. So now we change our position inside the app to this. Now let's try and find a destination again and see if it uses our new position instead. And there you go. So now it's using our new position. Now we just need to do something similar for the driver app as well. Okay, everyone, now we're going to do the same problem on the driver side instead, where the location is not being updated when getting a route. I started up the driver app with my position around here, and now I am about around here. I'm using the location with the freeway drive inside of iOS if you want to try and do the same experiment. So I was here initially, and when it's going to show the route to the passenger, it's going to start from here instead of from here, because we're using get current position instead of watch position. I just want to show you the problem before we start fixing it. So if I say find passengers and we say request, then you can see it's starting all the way down here where I initially started out having my position when I started the app. So it's not using the current position, just like inside of the passenger app. So now let's change it to watch position inside of the driver side, just like we do in the passenger. So let's change this to watch position and then have a watch ID on this. And then we should, on the component will unmount function, we're going to clear this watch. So navigator, geolocation, clear watch, and we pass in the watch ID. Now let's set latitude and longitude to null initially. So we do the check if the latitude and longitude are null. So we do down in the render, we say if the state latitude is null, we return null. So we don't get any errors rendering the map because the position is not being set, of the latitude longitude. Now let's try and see another issue there is inside of the app, and let's see how we can fix it pretty easily. So let's see. So now you can see how the map is following the user because our latitude and longitude state is being updated constantly. And inside of the map view, we have this region which is being set to the state of latitude and longitude. So every time the state of latitude and longitude changes, it's going to update the region of the map. Let's see how it looks inside of the passenger. Inside the passenger app, we have a initial region instead of just a region. Now let's try and see how it looks when we type in a destination and try to request a driver and a passenger. So now you see it started where our current position, which was right here, not our starting position, but suddenly it went back to the map as we updated our position. You can see I can't even zoom out because every time we get a new latitude and longitude, it's going to change the region, update the map. So the fix is pretty simple. We just need to make it into initial region instead of just region. Then we save it. And let's refresh this one also. Let's try again and see if it works now. So now my map is not being zoomed into my position, even though my position is updated, because we used the initial region instead of just the region tag. So region is being updated at every render we have inside of the app, while initial region is just what you initially have at the first render. One more thing we are going to change, actually two things, is we're going to make this console error logging into a console.log instead. The reason is that sometimes the GPS module, even on the simulator, is not ready yet, and you might receive an error, which means a big red screen, which is not so nice on the simulator to see. So therefore, make sure that in the watch position, you change all the console.errors to console.logs instead. So that's it. That's the last thing we change. And then you can move on to making the GPX routes that we're going to test out. Alright everyone, now we're going to build something where we have a specific route, a test route for the driver to drive back to our passenger. So our driver is going to come here from the Googleplex, and he's going to drive through here and come all the way down to our passenger here. And then we can test out the functionality to send notifications to the passenger as the driver is close by. So the point we need to go and do now is to generate a GPX file based on this route and load it inside either the iOS simulator or the Android simulator. The site you can use to generate this GPX file from the maps is maps2gpx.com. They have a blue site where you can generate this GPX file for both environments. On the main page, which is orange here, you will just create a GPX file, not for a specific environment, but if you go onto the mobile dev site, you can select for either Android Studio and Xcode. One more thing is that it's important that you add the Google API key inside here, because you need to get the full route with all the waypoints and so on. If you don't do that, you will not get a full route that you can use inside of the simulator. Another thing to take notice of is if you select Xcode, I had some issues with the recommended travel speed that was walking travel speed. So you need to select uniform travel speed and select driving on the Xcode simulator. But for Android, I didn't seem to have that issue, so I will just let it be recommended travel speed on Android. Now for the route, of course you can select any route you want, but I have Googleplex here, and then I add the passenger. I select to go to the passenger here on 1501 Charleston Road. And now if you want to set the location of the passenger app, so whatever emulator you're using that for, you want to set the coordinates of the passenger to be on this location. You need to right click here and say click on what's here. When you look here, you can see the longitude and latitude of that coordinate, so that you can use to set the coordinates of the passenger app. So in order to generate the GPX file, select the menu up here, and select share or embed map, and then just copy the link, paste it in here. Make sure you have your API key here, and then I'm going to copy the API key from my API key file here. You also have your API key inside of the Android manifest file, remember that. So select the API key from there and paste it in here. And Android Studio recommended travel speed. Then we say, let's go. And I have my file here. I can try and open it to see how it looks. And it looks okay. That's the route we have here. Now I'm going to, let me just rename it so that I have a good name for it. I will call it test route 2. That's just because I have another test route. And we'll call it test route 2 _ Android. It's a good idea to put the Android or iOS in the name, because we're going to have 2 different files, one for each system. So then I do the same for Xcode. But this time I select uniform travel speed and I set it to be driving at 40 kilometers an hour. Okay. say let's go. And then we have our iOS version. So test route 2 iOS. So now I have my 2 files. I can put them inside of Visual Studio Code as well to see if they look okay. And this one looks okay. I have lots of waypoints. If you don't have the API key or a valid API key inside, you will not get this many waypoints. So make sure you have a decent amount of waypoints. Now it's time to load the GPX file inside of the Android emulator. Now in order to load the GPX file inside of Android emulator, it's quite easy compared to the iOS version. You simply need to click the 3 dots down here to the right of the emulator, and then you need to make sure you're on the location tab to the left here. And then you need to click on the load GPX and select the file that we created in the earlier section with the site. So in this case, I had the test route 2 Android GPX. So now all the routes is loaded inside this GPS data playback section. And we can simply press the play button to start playing the driving. So now we start over at the Googleplex. And then we start driving. And then we should be ending up somewhere around here. And there we go. So you noticed I ended up kind of far out from my destination. It's actually here, but I guess that either the simulator is not quite correct all the time, or the coordinates are not, but GPS is basically also that way in real life, so that's fine. I think for simulation purposes that is not always totally on point. We can still use it, and that's fine. That's more realistic actually. And well, when it's done with the playback, you will see the play button here, and it will stop at the last coordinate. So now it's on to see how we can do this inside of the iOS emulator. So in order to do it inside of iOS, you need to open Xcode and run the simulator from in here. So you need to open the project that we have inside of mobile, which means you go inside of the mobile folder, go to iOS, and you select the mobile.xcode project. And once you have the project opened and it has finished building and so on, then you need to go inside of the product tab here and select scheme, and then you select edit scheme. And then inside here in the options tab inside run, you can have the allow location simulation that should be on. It's on by default for me anyway. And in here you can add a GPX file to the project. So I can add a new GPX file to the project. I will select I have created a folder with the GPX file here in our mobile project, and I just add the iOS file here, and now the route is appearing in here. So now I can close this, and you may need to close the project, like just stop running it and start running it again. And then at some point you will have this little location icon appearing down here. When I started using the Xcode, I did not have this icon down here. You needed to go inside of the product edit scheme thing like we just did. And then when you start and run the project again, this will appear down here. And now you can select the simulation you want to simulate down here. So we select test route 2, iOS. And then it is going to simulate the driving here from Googleplex all the way to the destination we have. Now there's no speed configuration you can do here, so we just have this constant speed of 40 kilometers, but it's going to end up, it should be ending up around here. No, is it down here? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it was down here. And as you can see, it went back to our start location again. So the difference here between iOS and Android is also that Android just stops at the end location, while on iOS it's going to go back and forth in a loop with this loop route you have planned.